What if none of this is real, and you're just waking up now? The world around them hums too loud, too sharp, like it's about to break. His words hang in the air like a match above gasoline. She laughs, but her eyes don't. Then tell me what happens next. The Starlight Diner's neon sign flickered like a dying pulse, casting a sickly glow of the cracked pavement of Chicago's South Side. At 3:27 a.m., the city was a ghost, and Sophia Harris, 22, was its restless shadow. Her apron hung loose on her slight frame, her hazel eyes dulled by exhaustion and hunger. She scrubbed the counter in endless circles, the motion as automatic as her survival. Homeless for 2 years, she learned to live on the edge. Shelter cots when she could get them, the L trains hum when she couldn't. The diner, with its peeling wallpaper, sticky floors, and burnt coffee stench, was her only anchor, a paycheck that barely kept her alive. The bell above the door chimed, sharp against the silence. Sophia glanced up, expecting a drunk regular or a lost trucker. Instead, a man stepped inside, his presence as jarring as a spotlight in a blackout. His tailored coat, midnight blue and pristine despite the hour, screamed wealth. Dark hair, slicked back, framed a face too sharp, too commanding, like he'd been carved from obsidian. His blue eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Not with lust, but with a purpose she couldn't decipher. Coffee. Black, he said, sliding into a booth near the window. His voice was low, controlled, like he was used to the world bending to his will. Sophia grabbed the pot, her hand steady despite the unease curling in her gut. She poured, feeling his gaze track her every move, calculated and unrelenting. "You're Sophia, right?" He glanced at her name tag, but the way he said her name felt like he'd known it long before stepping through the door. She stiffened, her instincts screaming danger. "Yeah. Do I know you?" "Not yet." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers steepled. "I'm Ethan Remington. I have a proposition for you." Her gut twisted. Men like him didn't come to dives like this for coffee. "If you're looking for something extra, I'm not that kind of waitress." "It's not that," he said, his tone calm but unyielding, like steel wrapped in silk. "I need someone to carry my child. In vitro fertilization. No personal involvement. In exchange, I'll give you a furnished apartment in Lincoln Park, full medical care, and $1 million when the baby's born." The words hit like a sledgehammer, stealing her breath. $1 million. A home. A way out of this endless grind of hunger and cold. It sounded like a fairy tale, but fairy tales didn't exist in places like this. They were traps, bait for the desperate. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's eyes didn't waver, piercing through her defenses. "I've been watching you. You work harder than anyone here. You survived things most people couldn't. I need someone with that kind of strength." Sophia's mind spun. Survived, yes. Her family's death in a fire at 17, her dreams of college swallowed by poverty, her nights spent dodging danger on Chicago streets. She clawed her way through, but at what cost? Her body was a map of exhaustion, her hope a threadbare rag. But this was a deal with the devil, and Ethan Remington, billionaire tech mogul, was holding out the contract. "You're serious?" "Deadly." He slid a card across the table, his fingers brushing the chipped formica. "Think about it. Call me when you're ready." Sleep was a stranger that night. Sophia sat on a park bench in Humboldt Park, the November cold biting through her threadbare jacket. Ethan's car was a weight in her pocket. The contract he'd left her with heavier still. Its pages promised a life she couldn't imagine. A sleek apartment, medical coverage, $1 million, freedom, inked in black and white. But freedom always came with a hook. What did a man like Ethan want with her? Was it really her resilience? Or was there a darker game at play? She needed perspective. At the community center the next morning, she showed the contract to Mrs. Brown, the director who'd been her lifeline since she'd landed on the streets. Mrs. Brown's eyes, sharp behind her wire-rimmed glasses, scanned the pages with frown. "This is a lot of money, Sophia, but it's a lot of chains. You don't know this man's motives. What's he running from?" "I don't know," Sophia admitted, her voice small. "But I'm running out of time. I can't keep living like this. Nicole, her best friend from the shelter, sprawled on a couch nearby, her braids swinging as she snorted. A billionaire picking you out with a greasy spoon? This ain't no rom-com. Sophomore. What's his deal? He got a wife stashed somewhere? A secret kid? A dungeon in his penthouse. Sophia forced a laugh, but it was hollow. Ethan Remington was a name she'd seen in headlines. Tech titan, philanthropist untouchable. His life was a universe apart from hers, yet he'd walked into her diner like he'd been searching for her. The question burned. Why her? Was it her grit, as he claimed, or something more sinister? A man like him didn't need a waitress, unless she was a means to an end. A week later, she signed a contract in a glass-walled office downtown. Ethan's lawyer, a man with a handshake like a steel trap, watching her every move. The terms were stark. She'd undergo IVF, carry the child to term, and surrender at birth. In return, she'd get a furnished apartment in Lincoln Park, top-tier medical care, and $1 million. Ethan sat across from her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes lingered, a flicker of something, curiosity or calculation, passing through them. Sophia's hand trembled as she signed. The pen scratched loud in the sterile silence. She was crossing a line, and there was no going back. The procedure was clinical, the needles sharp but quick. The weeks that followed were a blur of transformation. The Lincoln Park apartment was a revelation. Hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a bed so soft it felt like a betrayal of her old life. She ate real meals, steak, fresh vegetables, not diner scraps or shelter soup. But the pregnancy, confirmed 3 weeks later, brought a new weight. This wasn't just about her anymore. There was a life inside her, tied to a man whose motives she still didn't trust. Ethan visited weekly, his demeanor professional but probing. "What do you read?" he'd ask, or "What was your childhood like?" Sophia deflected, keeping her walls high. She'd learned long ago not to trust too easily. Men, money, promises, they all had a way of turning to ash. But Ethan's persistence was a chisel, chipping away at her defenses. One night, as they reviewed an ultrasound in her apartment, the grainy image of a tiny heartbeat flickering on the screen, he leaned closer, his hand brushing hers. Before she could react, he kissed her, soft, fleeting, but electric, sending a jolt through her veins. She pulled back, her heart racing. What the hell was that? "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough, his eyes clouded with something she couldn't name. "That wasn't part of the deal." "Then why did you do it?" she pressed, her voice shaken with anger and something else, something dangerous. He didn't answer, his silence a storm of its own. But his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, held something new. Regret? Longing? Sophia couldn't tell, and that scared her more than anything. The media storm hit, at 5 months pregnant. A paparazzo caught Sophia leaving a doctor's appointment, her belly just starting to show under her coat. The headlines exploded. "Billionaire's secret baby. Who is Sophia Harris?" Tabloids branded her a gold digger, a nobody leeching off Ethan's wealth. Ex-posts were merciless, calling her a whore, a scam artist, a homewrecker. Sophia's phone buzzed with venom, strangers telling her to go back to the gutter, or worse. She wanted to scream that she wasn't a villain, that she was just trying to survive. But the world didn't care about her truth. Worse, Emily Rothschild, Ethan's ex-fiancée, emerged like a specter from his past. On a national morning show, her blonde curls perfect and her eyes brimming with crocodile tears, she claimed Ethan was her soulmate, and Sophia was a scheming opportunist who'd seduced him. Sophia watched the interview in her apartment, her hands trembling as she clutched a mug of tea. The world saw her as the enemy, and Emily's lies were gasoline on the fire. Every glance at her phone brought a new wave of hate, each notification a dagger to her fragile hope. At her next checkup, the doctor's face was grim. "The baby has hypoplastic left heart syndrome," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "It's a serious congenital defect. He'll need multiple surgeries, starting right after birth, and there's a chance he won't survive them." Sophia's world tilted, the room spinning. This wasn't just a contract anymore. It was a life, fragile and uncertain, tethered to her by a heartbeat she could feel but couldn't protect. She looked at Ethan, who'd insisted on coming, his face pale but resolute. "We'll get the best specialists," he said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a fear that mirrored her own. "Whatever it takes." For the first time, they weren't just a billionaire and a waitress, bound by paper and promises. They were two people terrified for a child who might not make it. Sophia's hand drifted to her belly, a silent vow to life inside her. "I'll fight for you, no matter what." What would you do if the only way out of your past demanded a sacrifice you couldn't bear? If you're hooked on Sophia and Ethan's journey, hit that like and subscribe button for more heart-pounding twists. Clara, Ethan's estranged aunt, became an unexpected ally. A wiry woman in her 60s with smoker's rasp and a stare that could cut glass. She cut ties with Ethan's family over a mysterious feud years ago. She reached out after seeing Sophia's face plastered across the news, her number appearing on Sophia's phone like a lifeline. "You're not what they say," Clara told her over coffee in a quiet Wicker Park cafe, her voice rough but warm. "You're a survivor, kid. Don't let those vultures define you." Clara's words were a bomb, but the pressure mounted. Anonymous letters began arriving at Sophia's apartment, scrawled with threats. "Leave him or pay." One night, a brick shattered her living room window, glass scattering across the hardwood. A note was tied to it, the words chilling. "You don't belong in his world." Sophia's hand shook as she called Ethan, who arrived within the hour, his jaw tight with rage. "I'm filing a restraining order against Emily," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This stops now." But Sophia wasn't convinced. Emily's wealth and connections made her a phantom, untouchable, her schemes slithering through the cracks of Ethan's defenses. The media loved her narrative, a scorned heiress fighting for a man, while Sophia was cast as the villain. She felt like a pawn in a chess game, moved by hands she couldn't see. At 7 months, the stress became unbearable. Sophia fled to a motel on Chicago's outskirts, needing to escape the cameras, the threats, the weight of it all. She sat on the sagging bed, staring at an ultrasound photo of her son. Their son, his tiny heart, flawed but beating, was a reminder of why she'd signed that contract. But the kiss, Ethan's silence, the media's cruelty, it was too much. What was this thing between them? A mistake? A lie? Or something real? And why did it feel like Ethan was holding back a piece of himself, something he wasn't ready to share? Ethan found her the next day, his coat damp from the rain, his face etched with worry. "Why didn't you tell me you were leaving?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bed, his voice soft but urgent. "I needed to think," she said, her voice raw. It's not just a contract anymore, is it?" He looked at her, his guard down for the first time, his blue eyes vulnerable. "No, it's not." Before they could unpack it, Sophia's phone rang. It was Mrs. Brown, her voice frantic. "Sophia, you're bleeding. Get to a hospital. Now." The storm hit Chicago that night, rain hammering the city like a judgment. Sophia's contractions started at 34 weeks, too early. Ethan drove through the deluge, his knuckles white on the wheel, as Sophia gripped his hand, pain tearing through her like wildfire. At the hospital, doctors rushed her into delivery, the room a blur of white coats and beeping monitors. Lucas, their son, was born small, his cries faint but fierce, a tiny warrior defying the odds. His heart, flawed and fragile, needed surgery immediately. Sophia and Ethan waited in the NICU waiting room, the hours dragging like centuries. She didn't pray often, but she prayed now, her hand in Ethan's, their fingers intertwined like a lifeline. When the doctor emerged, his face weary but hopeful, Sophia's knees buckled. "He's stable," he said. "The surgery was a success, but he'll need time and more procedures." In the NICU, Sophia saw Lucas for the first time. Tiny, wired to machines, his chest rising and falling with stubborn determination. Ethan stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, his voice a whisper. "He's a fighter, like you." But the story twisted again, darker and more tangled. Emily's schemes didn't stop with the restraining order. A week after Lucas's surgery, a new headline broke. "Billionaire's baby mama tied to criminal past?" A forged document, leaked to the press, claimed Sophia had a juvenile record. Petty theft, drug charges, even an assault charge. It was a lie, a vicious fabrication. But the damage was immediate. X erupted with vitriol, calling for Sophia to be locked up or deported. Her past, already a wound, was now a weapon, and the world was wielding it against her. Clara, ever the strategist, dug into the leak's source. She uncovered emails linking Emily to a private investigator who'd fabricated the documents. But there was more, a bombshell Clara kept secret until she could verify it. Emily hadn't just targeted Sophia. She'd been digging into Ethan's past, unearthing a secret he'd buried deep. Lucas wasn't his first child. Years ago, in his early 20s, Ethan had fathered a daughter with a college girlfriend, a relationship he'd ended abruptly when his tech empire began to rise. The mother, heartbroken, had vanished with the child, and Ethan, consumed by guilt and ambition, had never pursued them, believing it was for the best. Emily had found the mother, now living in obscurity in Oregon, and threatened to expose the story unless Ethan reconciled with her. Worse, Emily had contacted the mother, sowing lies that Ethan planned to take the girl away. Clara confronted Ethan in Sophia's apartment, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You didn't tell her about your daughter, did you?" Sophia's breath caught, her heart plummeting. "What daughter?" Ethan's face crumpled, the untouchable billionaire suddenly human, raw. "Her name's Lily. She's 12. I made a mistake years ago. I thought I was protecting her by staying away. I didn't know Emily would use it against me." Sophia's mind spun, the room closing in. The contract, the kiss, the media storm. Now this. "You let me think I was the only one carrying your child," she said, her voice trembling with betrayal. "You let me believe this was just about us. About Lucas. Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know how," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't want to lose you. Not after everything." The revelation shattered something in Sophia. She'd trusted him, let herself feel something, love maybe, and now the secret threatened to unravel it all. But Lucas, still fighting in the NICU, tethered her to Ethan, to this mess of a life they'd built. She wanted to run, to disappear, but she couldn't. Not now. What would you do if the person you trusted most hid a truth that could destroy everything you'd fought for? If you're gripped by Sophia and Ethan's saga, smash that like and subscribe button for more heart-stopping twists. Clara took charge, leaking Emily's emails to a major outlet. The story flipped overnight. Eris's desperate smear campaign against innocent mother. Emily's credibility collapsed, her threats silenced by a renewed restraining order and a lawsuit from Ethan's legal team. The media frenzy began to fade, but the damage to Sophia and Ethan lingered, a fracture that wouldn't heal easily. Lucas's recovery was slow but steady, his tiny heart healing with each passing week. Sophia spent every day by his side, reading him picture books, her voice a lifeline in the sterile NICU. Ethan was there too, his presence constant but strained, the secret of Lily hanging between them like a guillotine. Sophia wrestled with her feelings, anger at his deception, love for the man who'd fought for her and Lucas, fear that this fragile family would crumble. One night, as they sat by Lucas's crib, Ethan broke the silence. "I'm going to find her," he said, his voice low but resolute. "Lily, I owe her that much. And I owe you the truth about everything." Sophia looked at him, her heart torn. "You should have told me from the start. But I'm not running. Not from you, not from Lucas. Just don't lie to me again." He took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I didn't expect this," he said, his eyes searching hers. "Not just Lucas. You. I want us to be a family. Sophia, if you'll have me." She didn't answer right away. Trust was a fragile thing, and hers had been battered. But as she looked at Lucas, then at Ethan, she saw something worth fighting for, a future, not just a contract. The final twist came months later, just as Lucas was cleared for discharge. Clara uncovered one last piece of Emily's scheme. She paid a nurse to tamper with Sophia's medical records, falsifying test results to suggest pregnancy was at higher risk than it was. The goal? To push Sophia into a breakdown, to make her flee or lose the baby. The nurse confessed, and Emily faced criminal charges, her empire of lies collapsing for good. Lucas, now strong enough to leave the hospital, bore a tiny scar on his chest, a badge of his fight. Sophia and Ethan moved into a quiet brownstone in Evanston, away from the city's chaos. The $1 million hit Sophia's account, but it felt secondary. She used part of it to fund a scholarship at the community center, a thank you to Mrs. Brown and Nicole, who believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. She kept the rest in savings, a safety net for Lucas's future. Ethan tracked down Lily, now 12, and her mother in Oregon. He began building a relationship with his daughter, slow and cautious, respecting the boundaries her mother set. Sophia supported him, even as she navigated her own role in this new, complicated family. Claire became a fixture, her sharp wit a balance to their chaos, teaching Sophia how to navigate Ethan's world without losing herself. One evening, as Sophia tucked Lucas into his crib, his tiny hand curled around her finger. Ethan stood behind her, his arms around her waist, his breath warm against her neck. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond their window, a reminder of the city that had tested them, broken them, and rebuilt them. The contract that started it all was a distant memory, replaced by something real. Love, hard-won and unbreakable. They weren't a fairy tale. They were survivors, a family forged in fire, with scars to prove it. Sophia looked at Ethan, then at Lucas, and knew this was her home, not the apartment, not the money, but the life they'd built together. As they stood there, the future stretched before them, uncertain but theirs. They were ready for whatever came next.